Hello, I'm Robin and welcome to the November edition of Molten Music Monthly. You join us on a very wet, cold, chilly November morning, but here we are to warm ourselves up with the glow of the valves and transformers, digital bits moving about of this month's latest music technology releases. We never need be cold in the presence of such electricity. So what wonders do we have coming up this month? Well, let me read them to you. Teenage Engineering knocks it out of the park. Mexico has a colourful idea for your next modular. Doepfer doesn't, but they do have a reworking of their most basics. Centrevillage has the perfect mini quantizer. Nightfox Audio stacks up the instruments. Ableton dawdles its way to version 12. Cubase cleans house with version 13. The AtoVproject goes haptic. Cherry Audio finds yet another old synth to emulate. Giorgio gets tied up in tape. SOMA Labs bends MIDI to its will. Decade Bridge drones on about Albers. Behringer gets its finger out of the UB-Xa. Torso wants to sculpt some samples. Roland puts all its synths in a Galaxy class instrument. Hologram gives us the warm and fuzzies. XAOC Chaos beefs up the Batumi. ROLI remembers MIDI. This is not rocket science. We'll see you next Tuesday. DivKid piles on the modulation, and MyVolts has the power. But first, an update on Synth East. Synth East 2024, the most extraordinary, marvellous, fascinatingly awesome and cuddly synthesizer show that you're ever going to experience in 2024. It takes place over the weekend of the 23rd, 24th, 25th of February. This is taking place at the Norwich Art Centre on the whole, and let me tell you what it is, in case you've just been blissfully unaware. Let me remove that bliss and replace it with some awesome synthesizer expo excitement. So, Friday night, right? Norwich Art Centre, we're going to see the Subodnik film. The film all about Molten Subodnik, the pioneer of electronic music. It's a new documentary, relatively. I don't believe it's ever been shown in the UK, so this should be the premiere. So you can come and see that. Then after that, we've got Adam Buxton. I know. Adam Buxton's talking to Steve Davis, my mate Steve Davis, about modular electronic music and all that kind of stuff. And then we can chill out with Luke Sanger afterwards in the bar, playing some awesome ambient modular. That's the Friday night, and that's just the build-up to the actual day on the Saturday. On the Saturday, it's the expo, so you come down to Norwich Art Centre again, it'll be filled with manufacturers showing their stuff, jiggling about with their knobs and patch cables, demonstrating whatever it is that they've got to bring to the show. And you can mill around in that for as much as you like all day, from about 10:30 till 5. During that time we'll have some performances, and that includes Tristan Burfield and Hardwired, and then we're going to have the mega awesome legendary thing, which is the All-Star Patch Off. That's going to feature myself, Steve Davis, Gaz Williams, Myla Melodies, Nina Richards and Jason Jervis, and we are going to pull names out of the hat and then jam, two of you, jam, go, 1, 2, 3, off you go, and it's going to be an awesomely unique experience. So that's the day. And then in the evening, we've got a separate thing. We've got a gig with Blancmange playing. Good Lord. Blancmange and Ultramarine in support. And then I might do a little bit of a warm-up. It might just be me. Could be me with others. We'll see. We haven't quite decided yet. That's the Saturday night. Then on the Sunday, we've given over some time to do some workshops, some DIY workshops. These are going to be over at Electronic Sound headquarters, around a few tables. We're just going to get together, going to chill out. After being completely plastered the night before, I imagine, we're going to solder some things together and put together some modular. The workshops are being run by Bafako and the Thonk, and so what you need to do is sign up with us for the workshop and then buy the kit from Thonk or Bafako in order to do that on the actual day. It's brilliant fun. If you've never done it, come along and try it out, because it can be absolutely absorbing and thrilling. And I'll be there just chilling out, and it will be a nice time. So that is all happening in February. Now, last year, we kind of sold out about a month before the event. So just don't put it off. I'd recommend buying tickets. We've probably sold about halfway through the tickets at the moment, which isn't too bad considering we've only been live for a week or two. So don't delay. Get hold of your tickets and come and have a fantastic synthesizer time in Norwich, in the east of England, the only thing of its kind, and it should be a lot of fun. And if you're a manufacturer out there who doesn't know anything about this, then do get in touch. I've got 2 or 3 tables left still to fill for the main hall for the expo on the Saturday. So if you've got something synthesizer-y to show, some new products, a new modular, a synthesizer, whoever you are, just give us a shout and hopefully we can book you in. So no one saw this coming then. Teenage Engineering Knockout 2. Now the original Knockout was a pocket operator, a little sort of credit card size, a bit more like that, pocket calculator size weirdo thing that had a few samples in it. It'd go and you could make little tunes, had a little graphical LCD display that had guys punching each other as you did the thing. Knockout, you see, it's great, it's fun, it's groovy, it didn't cost too much. Fantastic. So what I first saw of this was the name, sort of little bits leaked out in my sort of direction, and when it was called the EP133 Knockout 2. The original one was called the PO33, I think it was, Knockout, and so I automatically assumed it was just going to be an upgraded version of the pocket operator. And it kind of is. And when we first saw a picture of it, again, sort of like the day before release, it looked like it was a palm-sized device. And then when it actually got released and they brought out this big thing like this that looks like a cash register rather than a little calculator, we were surprised. I was surprised. Were you surprised? I was pretty surprised. But the surprise didn't end there. Because here you have this beautiful looking, beautifully designed, wafer thin, gorgeous looking, you know, hitting all of the right marks in terms of layout, of feng shui, of design, the colouring, the screen was looking gorgeous. Wow, as a sampler, good lord, this is going to be 1,500 quid. No problem. 299. What? Is this Teenage Engineering? 299? Are they sure? Apparently so. 299. So there's bound to be something terribly wrong with it. I mean, first of all, you could say it's only got 64 megabytes of RAM. I mean, no one really deals in megabytes anymore, I don't think. So 64 megs, that doesn't seem very much. So there we have it. I mean, it's a beautiful looking device. Everyone's having a bit of a go. There's a few videos out about it already, which is very exciting. I get the impression overall that it's relatively simple and straightforward, which may reflect some of the price, I suppose, and that it doesn't have particularly deep level of anything. It's a pick it up and play and go. You know, hold record, do some things, move a slider, put in some automation, record some stuff, play it back, fiddle about with it, add some effects. I think it's very exciting that Teenage Engineering would release such a device at such a price point. I think that more than anything is kind of stunning everybody right now, and it's a good thing. Hopefully that will reflect back into their way of doing things, where they think, well, you know, maybe there is some value in just aiming that price a little bit lower, letting more people into the way that Teenage Engineering works. I mean, it's a heck of an upgrade over the original. Just amazing. It's amazing that they're even related. But yeah, great stuff. I like it. We're going to see it around a lot, I think. From Oficina de Sonido, possibly, comes my First Modular. I like it. Partly it's the colour. I mean, it's also available in black. I mean, so it's not just the colour, but the colour is something of it. It looks exciting. It looks fun. It looks like something that you can play with. And ultimately what you get is 8 modules, I think. You know, the usual suspects, but also quite interesting. For instance, the oscillator seems to be some kind of chordal thing. It generates chords, and can also generate leads, and it has 8 different waveforms inside. So I'm kind of getting the feeling that behind the scenes we've got a lot of digital shenanigans going on, but that's no bad thing. If it provides a decent amount of functionality so you feel like you're getting value for money. I thought it was pretty well thought out. I thought it was a good selection of modules. The filter's based on an MS-20, the Korg MS-20 filter, which is very cool. It's got a little 8-step sequencer in there. It also has a mixer and a delay. I think effects are always vital. If you're trying to make modular interesting, stick effects in every time. You need a delay at the very least, if not a delay reverb, or both, or some crushing of some kind. You need something, otherwise your rack can feel very dry, and it always feels like you're going to need to add something to it. Although there is also room in the case to add something to it. There's something like, it's a 60 HP case and they've got about 48 HP worth of modules that come with the kit. This is a great attempt at trying to provide a simple entry-level modular system, and I wish them all the best. Which brings us to Doepfer, who have been trying to accomplish this far longer than anybody else. So they've just reworked their basic systems, because what happens at Doepfer is that you can buy one of their A100 cases, big chunky blocky case, and it can come with a whole bunch of modular to get you going. And there have been various versions of this over the years. What they've done with the Basic System 3 is they've brought it all back to the basics. So you have a pair of VCOs, which is really nice. There's a lot you can do with a pair of VCOs. Then you've got mixers, envelopes, filters, and VCAs to drive your standard synthesizer voice kind of thing. But then they've also put in interesting things like wave modifiers, wave folders, ring modulation, slew limiting and sample and hold. So there's some interesting, more utility and quirky experimental stuff in there too. So it puts together quite a chunky, quite a nice, quite an interesting basic system. I mean, they designed it in one respect as an entry into modular, just like our friends with First Modular, but also they're suggesting it could be a good way to bring your own studio, your own modular system perhaps back to some basic ideals and foundations of what modular should be about. So they've not stuck in anything particularly digital. It's all very analog, very synth voice based, and very straightforward. Although it is perhaps missing a couple of things, like effects, as I mentioned, an output module, and also a sequencer. So there's no way to run it, whatever that may mean. So you'll need to be connecting it to a different system or a larger system in any case. But there's no doubt what you get with Doepfer is high quality, good value modules that are based on some of the most classic designs out there. The price, which kind of reveals that nature of Eurorack behind it, is around about £3,000. So that's quite hefty. Eurorack is so difficult. I would say that if you haven't been to the Doepfer website for a while, go and check it out, because they are moving to something this millennium, which is amazing. I mean, they've had this old website cranking along for years and years and years, for decades. The same old thing where it's just like one massive list of stuff. Whereas they're starting to move across to something a little bit more, Web 2 focused, perhaps. Doepfer have been ploughing this same furrow their entire time, and there's something awesome about that. But I also think there's room for flights of fancy and doing something a little bit different. And I sense that there's a difference coming from Doepfer. We shall see. Centrevillage are over in Japan. Give them a wave. They make some interesting things. A couple of strange, interesting modules out there. If they weren't quite so far away, I might be a lot more tempted to grab hold of some of their bits and pieces. But something which they've just released, which I have grabbed hold of, and it's currently threading its way through global postal services to reach me, is the SQT. It looks simple and delicious. It's got a little bunch of LEDs on the front telling you what your scale is. It has 12 scales inside that you can dial up, and you can add your own. And I think probably the key to this for me is going to be to create some of my own scales, which are just simple. So I just want to turn on like a C, an E flat and a B flat, something like that. Or I want to turn on a C, F and a G, or 3 notes, 4 notes, and have randomness and probability going into that in order to create the tune, to create what it is that's going on. And this looks perfect for that. It also has a couple of extra quirks, one of which is that you can send a trigger in order to trigger the next note. So rather than just constantly quantizing whatever's coming through, you can force it to accept some kind of rhythm, which is quite interesting. So you're doing it at the quantizer rather than doing it somewhere else, like at the VCA or the filter, or some other triggerable thingamy-bob. And it will also pass a trigger out whenever the note changes, in whatever way you're doing it. So it has just enough in there to make it more than itself, while just doing that one job that I want it to do. I just want it to quantize. Just quantize. So I'm looking forward to getting that. I'll do a video on it, I think, because I'd like to do something on Centrevillage just to support their work, which is great and interesting out there in faraway lands. There are gazillions of software instruments out there. Tons and tons of samples, just acres and acres of library that just goes on and on forever. Whatever it is you could possibly want, you can probably find is already been sampled to death through 1,000 different microphones, through 1,000 different sound engineers, adding the vintage and the gorgeousness of it from a gazillion microphones, all just coming in. I imagine at some point there's going to be the ability to load an AI plugin where you just go all the strings in the world and it will go and there's your instrument. I imagine that's the next phase. But before we get there, every now and again, someone comes along and goes, I've done something a little bit different, just a little bit different, hello, a little bit different. And so that kind of deserves our attention, I suppose. One such company is Nightfox Audio, who have released three virtual instruments. One of them is a grand piano, one of them is strings, and one of them is plucks and mallets. Does that sound interesting to you? Well, let me tell you why perhaps it's worth a look. Because what they've done is essentially got a number of instruments together. So rather than just giving you one extraordinary piano or something, they've got a number of different pianos, and they stack them together and use each piano as part of the system. I'm not explaining this very well. No, probably not. So you've got your grand piano, but then you've also got other pianos, and all of these stack up in the interface, and they are directly related to a mixer at the bottom. So the idea is you use all the dozen or so instruments, you use them together, or can use them together, or they are rather designed and curated to be potentially used together. So rather than loading each one individually, although of course you can do that, you are mixing between different ones, which means you're taking the character of one and blending it with the sound of another. Or you're taking some of the more esoteric background sounds and scrabblings and applying that to the purer sound of something else. And it's of course got other things like arpeggiation in there and effects and mixing, so modulation and stuff. It's just interesting. I mean, it struck me that loading it up, trying out some of the presets, it's like, this is great. And that's really all you need. I feel that sampled instruments, software instruments in that way, for me, have lost their excitement simply because they are inevitably awesome. They're all so great that it almost becomes pointless. You don't find yourself on a voyage of discovery anymore. You just go, yeah, that's great, that's perfect, that'll fit. Yeah, no, that would also fit. So anything which is pushing me out of what I would normally just blindly accept as a thing is good. So yeah, check them out. There's three. The piano one particularly, I think, is particularly awesome. But if you're looking for something just moving slightly towards feeling original, then give Nightfox Audio a go. What I love about Ableton is that it just does its own thing. It doesn't really care. And I think that's a quality which I quite like in a DAW manufacturer. It's just following its own thing, done the same thing for years. You keep wanting, people keep telling you must change, you must be something else, you must be more like Studio One, you must be more like Pro Tools, you must do these things. And Ableton Live just goes, nah, we're just going to stay the same. We quite like it. When we invented it back in 1963, we quite liked it, and we're not really interested in changing, particularly. Thanks very much. We'll just keep stuffing more bits in, and so that's kind of where we are with it, I suppose. But this is version 12. Version 12. So what does that bring? Well, they have bent to pressure a little bit, and they've allowed you to turn a few things off the screen so that you can get a bigger view of like the main page, or a bigger view of other bits and pieces. You can make things bigger. I mean, they've already played with this in version 11, I think, with some of the bigger devices that you could see larger screen. But now you've got a little bit more of that. It's a bit more dynamic. You can get rid of those bits and those bits to give you a larger view of what you're doing, and so it tends to look a bit more like any other DAW in that respect. But they are fiercely hanging on to the way everything moves, the knobs move, the look, the design, that is still staying there, even if they have let you fold a few of those bits away. I mean, oh my goodness, you can now move the mixer to make it larger or smaller. I mean, it's just extraordinary, really. Extraordinary times Ableton, I think I've got no respect for them now. So they've completely folded under the pressure of people going, can you just make it a little bit easier to use? Because they've spent 20 years going, no, not going to make it easier. No, you have to learn it our way, or go and use something easy like Bitwig. You crazies. So it's nice actually to see that they're now thinking that perhaps they could make things easier for us a little bit. They've also invented this great idea, right, that you can actually find things in the browser, like using filters. I don't mean filters, I mean you can put in categories and tabs and those sorts of things in order to drill down into that massive sample library of a continuous list of quizzical sample names and potentially find the sound you're after. Awesome. I also very much like the MIDI generators. Stuff that generates MIDI, that's got to be awesome. I mean, this sort of thing has been available within devices. I mean, because Ableton has this whole stack of a massive library of devices, which are essentially utilities / instruments / logical processes and functions which can do all sorts of stuff. So all this sort of thing has kind of been in there because third parties have added that functionality in, but now it's directly within the software. You've got things which will create stuff into your piano roll, so rather than it generating itself when you press go, this can now be part of your creative writing process, which is brilliant. Got a few new instruments, a few new plugins. You've got a new version of the granular type plugin, so you can mess around with funny noises and samples and clouds and grains and all that kind of thing. So I think overall Ableton have done a fabulous job with version 12. Although I tend to be a little bit flippant about these sorts of things, but I do really like what they're doing. I do love the fact that Ableton Live has been the same. I love its consistency. How you can open it up and go, yeah, all right, I know where everything is. I know what everything does. Although it's all very small, and I wish it was bigger. And I wish I could move the mixer, make that longer. I wish I could see that page bigger. Well, now you can, is the point I was getting to. So I feel with Live 12, they've really taken some decent steps in sorting a lot of those little bits and pieces out, as well as introducing some great new creative possibilities. Meanwhile, back at Factory Steinberg, Cubase has reached unlucky 13. Version 13, how remarkable is that? I don't know, it's quite remarkable, I suppose. What they seem to have done overall, I feel, is they've calmed it down a bit. This has been a process of calming it down. I think that they've been on quite a trajectory. It almost feels like a few versions ago, it was just an explosion of windows. You were constantly clicking, trying to close windows, trying to find where the heck it was you were and what it was that was open, because everything is just cascading in Windows being open. And since, was it version 10 where they adopted a more of a one window approach, a bit more of a Studio One, dare I say, way of looking at things, that I think was the real beginning of them calming that interface down to make it a less bamboozling place. Because you don't want to be bamboozled when you're trying to record and make stuff. You want to be inspired and invigorated. And hopefully, I think that's what Cubase 13 is taking us further down the road of doing. So part of that is streamlining the mixing console, which could get out of hand, I think, at times. It's just almost too enormous and you weren't quite sure which bit to look at. So they've streamlined it, calmed it down, made it fit better in the window, which is a good graphical change. One thing I like is that they've taken the track visibility elements from Studio One and stuck that into the editor. I don't care. Honestly, I don't care if doors steal from each other. If it's a good feature, grab it. Use it in your one. I'm definitely a fan of that. So you can do multiple edits to multiple tracks of MIDI within the piano roll editor. You've also got a new range tool which helps in selecting exactly what it is that you want to do rather than having to drag boxes around stuff. In terms of plugins, I've got this massive vocal workstation thing called Vocal Chain, I think it is. It's got all sorts of vocal specific processing within the one plugin, and it's a great thing to have within a DAW as a standard function rather than having to get a third party in, which also bleeds into some other plugins that they've included, which are just simple drop on one knob vocal compressors. and bits and pieces which really just simplify that sort of workflow, which is great. And they've also brought back, apparently, I didn't know it went anywhere, the Steinberg vocoder. But there's more. They've done interesting things with chords. You can now put together chord progressions on pads, which are then injected into whatever instrument that you're playing. They've done some work on their sampler plugin section process. What is it exactly? The sampler thing is really good. It's this integrated sampler that sort of sits in the bottom of the Cubase Arrange window at times, that you can sort of turn any piece of audio that's on your window, just drop it straight in, and you can instantly play it like a sampler. They've also done something with the scoring. So this is Iconica Sketch, and it's a sample library, a 5 gig sample library covering 34 instruments, 140 articulations, that's built directly in. So is that about it? Yeah, I think that's about it. It sounds like a decent, chunky update, which brings, I love the fact it's bringing in new instruments and new plugins. That's something that it gives you a sense of reward, that you've been rewarded for sticking with a version of software, and I think that's no bad thing. From the AtoVproject, we get the dual harmonic oscillator. Massive thing. 2 massive oscillators, harmonic oscillators. What does that mean? Well, I think that means it's got individual knobs for individual octaves, so you can like additive synthesize additional harmonics within each oscillator, which is interesting. That all then piles into some kind of wave folding and wave mangling, which again is interesting. It's a complex oscillator, so the idea is one can be modulating the other, but of course they don't have to be doing that. But one of the key little features here is something along the lines of haptic feedback. So when you're moving your knobs about the place, it lets you know with a little vibration as to where you've been and where you're going and where you could be going from or to. So we're talking about blending harmonics, manipulating and modulating harmonics. You've got no end of inputs and outputs of which you can route from one to the other, and then you can just apply everything into each other, all brought together in this really luxuriously wide interface. So I think what's difficult to miss about the DHO is that it has a stunning amount of modulation within itself. There's 10 LFOs in there, 10 VCAs, all of which you can use to paint this sonic craziness within these 2 competing oscillators. Very interesting. I think it's the sort of thing that DivKid needs to do a video on, which I believe he has. Cherry Audio found another old keyboard. They dug it up somewhere, found it at a car boot sale or some kind of second-hand bonanza. And this is the Pro Soloist. It was an ARP keyboard synthesizer, kind of a preset machine, as I understand it. Built in the early 70s, had about 30 presets, I think it is, and introduced the idea of a keyboard that had kind of an aftertouch facility to it. Has a bit of an organ look about it, an organ vibe, and of course found itself all the way into all of the usual prog rock and experimental crazies of the 70s. Cherry Audio, of course, not happy to make just something which is completely authentic. They want to stretch the voice count up to 16 voices per layer, because there's 2 layers, so you can run 2 presets at the same time, which is a brilliant thing that of course you should do with software versions of classic vintage synthesizers. So there you go. Cherry Audio are awesome at this sort of thing, so I've got no doubt that it's the best sounding Pro Soloist that we've never heard, because we've never been able to play on the original one, because no one can remember what they looked like, and everyone was too drunk to notice what it was that Rick Wakeman was playing at the time when they played it anyway. But now we can have our own in software. This is a crazy one from Giorgio Sancristoforo. Fantastic stuff he makes, always fantastic. This one's called No-Fi. 4 tape cassette things, and that's it really. That's it. So it gives you 4 cassettes and tape, and you play. You go to town, you record stuff to one, you record it to another, you overdub to another, you have another loop going, so on and so forth. So it's essentially a 5-track recorder, but rather than recording everything onto the same cassette, you record them onto individual cassettes, which gives you a lot more scope for doing interesting loopy kind of things. Because if you're all recording onto the same cassette, then you couldn't really do that unless you did all the tracks at the same time, if you see what I mean. But of course this is emulation, so does that really matter? No, it doesn't matter really, but we like having individual cassettes. It looks fantastic, and of course you can then manipulate those separately and differently, mix it all together. I mean, it's got to be a fun place to play. I mean, if you're into restricting and limiting yourself down to something which is just simple and designed to feel as much analog as humanly possible, but you can't afford buying great big chunks of hardware, then this is brilliant. And it only costs about 20 quid. Sadly, it's Mac only at the moment, but apparently a Windows version is on its way. So out of the minds of SOMA Labs comes the Metaconformer. See, that's a worrying name. It makes it sound like you're conforming to something. Anyway, what we have is this little box that gives us some MIDI processing. You can use it simply to break and split MIDI and a MIDI throughway to different devices. You can also use it to MIDI merge controllers back into itself and then route that back out. But that's just the starting point. Those are just the basics. What it really wants to do is be the hub between your controller and yourself and your studio, your synthesizer collection. Because it allows you to route differently. It allows you to split and layer across your keyboard and then fart that out over different MIDI channels to different synths, to different groups of synths. Or you can use your different synths together as a single synth. So you plug your controller in, farm out to different synths, and then the Metaconformer will decide which synth to play each note on, giving you this voice allocation as if you're using a polyphonic synthesizer, which is pretty fascinating. So you make a polysynth out of anything. Just plug it all in, put it through your Metaconformer, and that'll do all of the allocation and all the messing about and stuff, and you get this. I mean, you're going to have to mix all of your output somewhere, but through your mixer you're going to get this enormous, potentially exciting kind of polychained sound. Another slightly weird thing it can do is it can use your keyboard to send MIDI controller messages. So it translates notes into MIDI CC, which I suppose it's like having keyboard tracking to some degree. You could keyboard track to a filter, so as you play up and down the notes, the filter is being opened and closed relative to that. Possibly, is that the idea? I'm not entirely sure. I mean, it talks about having to use two Metaconformers, so you can use two keyboards, one of which is doing the transformation, the other one which is playing. So you could play one and then do something with the other one. Was that right? Or whichever way you want to look at it, it's an interesting little box that could really revitalize all of your desktop bits and pieces. Because I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm forever taking a little synth out, putting it down, connecting a keyboard to it, playing with it, and then putting it away, and then trying to get, well, probably not putting it away. It just sort of gathers dust and knocks around while I stick another one on and then play with that. So having something which allows you to remain a bit more permanently connected, a bit like a MIDI through box of old, I suppose, but something which has more to it, more intelligence to it, something you can use to do different and interesting things with your MIDI gear. I like that. From Decade Bridge comes Albers. It's a nice looking, sort of dark and mysterious drone machine. Basic idea with the drone machine is that you have a bunch of oscillators and you set them to different pitches and it drones. That's lovely. Yeah, no, there's more to it than that. You've got pitch control, but also level control. It's got a lot of patching, so you can patch one into another to modulate and make stuff crazy. And actually in this case, each of the oscillators has its own LFO ready and willing and waiting to modulate the heck out of itself. Along with the LFO modulation, you've also got a light dependent resistor that you can use and route and patch that to things. It's got a filter, mixing inside, all of that, so you can bring down your individually modulated VCOs, bring them down, wave them about, crash them through your low pass filter and out into the world. There's lots of patch sockets, lots of CV control, which is great, interesting for patching other bits and pieces in. It also comes with a little booster circuit to allow you to get line level signals and other bits and pieces in there as well, which is a nice thing to include. That saves you having to mess around with that. But ultimately, drones are really their own thing. They're a thing you either enjoy or you don't. It's like I've got the Elmira up here, which reminds me there's a new firmware update for this, which gives it a whole bunch of new filters and bits and pieces that I really need to go and try out. But the Decade Bridge is a similar idea to this. Similar. With multiple VCOs, modulation, control, droning, sound that just emanates out of it, filtering, wanging, bits and pieces. Yeah, it's a good sort of fun thing. Behringer is about to release, or has released, or is currently shipping, or it is almost shipping, or it is almost here, released, announced, the UB-Xa. The UB-Xa, this is the synthesizer that Uli has wanted to to do ever since he ever heard anything about synthesizers. This Behringer UB-Xa clone is the one that's really captured everyone's imagination about 6 years ago when they first announced it. Just such a long time ago. It's crazy, really. I mean, Behringer, of course, has become this entity which swirls with all sorts of thoughts and feelings and baggage, which is a shame, because this looks to be an awesome synthesizer. And if they'd just done that, why couldn't they have just done awesome synthesizers and forget about insulting people and running on about how poor people treat them and going grrr at the world? If they would just focus their energies on the awesomeness of synthesizers, I think we'd all be much happier, to be fair. And this is an example of potentially what they can achieve. I mean, the releases of synthesizers have been amazing. They've brought a whole load of synthesizers back into use which had been disappeared. And that's a brilliant, admirable thing. And this is perhaps the next stage in that, in recreating something which is undoubtedly a classic synthesizer. Oberheim, of course, still exists, and Oberheim are making their own synthesizers. But I think it's completely fair for anyone to try to recreate a synthesizer that no longer exists. And that's what Behringer have done. It looks decent. I mean, the original UB-Xa was really quite a deep machine, whereas this is the more squat, deep mind-sized kind of keyboard that Behringer like to do, because everything inside is miniaturized. It's all surface mount. It's all very, very small, and so they don't have to use up quite so much space. But the layout is kind of as sparse as the original, and you forget, or at least I forget, about how few knobs these things had. I mean, we just assume that it's all just covered in knobs. No, that's more of a modular thing and more recent thing on synthesizers. It's really just got the handful of bits. It's got your pitch control, you've got your filter, your envelopes and LFOs. That's it. No funny stuff. No funny stuff. They've enhanced it a little bit. Of course, it's not 8 voices now, 16 voice stereo voices. So you've got stereo stuff, stereo signal path going on in there, so each of the VCAs is also stereo. And this is the first time apparently that they've included their poly aftertouch keyboard. This is a new keybed. This is probably one of the things that's kept it delayed for so long, is getting that right. And that gives you poly aftertouch, so each note can be individually modulated. It sounds, I don't know, I mean, it's interesting because the demo video they did was quite long, but there wasn't a great deal of change between the sounds. It just sort of sounded Oberheim-esque. And a few people have commented on there wasn't a whole lot of change in those timbres. There was just that sound. And if that sound is what you're after, then this is definitely it. But it would be good to see a little bit more variation, a little bit more change, a little bit more creativity pumped into what it's supposed to sound like, I think. But the other thing that was quite interesting was that the price was originally punted out there at $14.99, and everybody went, "What? I'm sorry, $14.99? This is outrageous!" Everybody threw their Model Ds in the air and threw their Craves in the air, going, "No, we want all of the synths for under £100." So it's an interesting choice. It's a flagship synthesizer, I think you could say, and it probably is going to reflect on how these other ones are going to come, because there's going to be, as far as we understand it, a Doepfer 8, a CS80, and other such clones coming along in time. And I imagine they're all going to be of a similar form factor and therefore a similar price. And it's a bit more. It's not a premium price. I mean, for 1,500 quid, you can't get very much that can compete with it in terms of being 16-voice analog synthesis. You know, Sequential Take 5 is a little bit more expensive, and that's probably as close to a proper big analog synthesizer as you're going to get to this. Otherwise, other stuff that flows around it are a bit more digital, like the Roland XM or their System 8, or you get into sort of slightly more entry-level areas. But anyway, the price for a lot of Behringer users was quite a shock, which was quite, well, it's just kind of funny because it is, really. But a word has it that when it actually reaches the shops, which, as I understand it, is going to be in around 2 weeks, the price is probably going to be lower. So maybe it will be under £1,000. I mean, that would be amazing, because that would just be amazing to have such a synthesizer for under £1,000. But it is, you know, it's not cheap as chips. It's a fair investment for such a thing, and I think that's interesting, and I think it gives the consumer a lot more choice Because if you have that sort of money to spend on a synthesizer, there's a much bigger range. If you've got 100 quid, you know, your choices are limited, and that's where Behringer really excels, in the £100 to £200 market. But it's going to be interesting to see how this goes. So yeah, there we go. It could be finally here. The Torso S4 is a sculpting sampling machine. It's got a dirty great big screen on it showing you the sample, some controls in a minimalist interface that kind of blends into the darkness of itself. The idea is that it's kind of inspired by tape. It's trying to be, you know, directly in. None of this fiddly-fabbling about with samples and craziness. It wants to be instant and straight in there. A workflow that you just hit record and you do something, you then hit record and do something. You know, that element, I mean, I feel there's a real push to find the simplicity of an analog workflow, but with all of the crap removed and placed in a nice pristine digital situation. The S4 has four stereo tracks, and each has an audio engine which can be used for sampling, for granular processing, for morphing, resonators, and a whole load of different audio effects. It's about capturing sound. Use it as a tape machine, use it as a sound blending effects engine, or use it very simply as a MIDI controlled sampler. Stick in a keyboard, play the sounds, da-da-da-da-da-da. You can transform each track into a different element, so it can be used as a sampler, used as a morphing resonator, can be used as a granular, different sounds of different soundscapes, all being used in parallel, because each of these tracks is separate, has its own audio engine and its own nature of being. It has all sorts of animated modulation inside. It has MIDI, has sync, it has audio ins and outs. It's quite nice. I mean, it's a gorgeous, lovely square slab of stuff. Galaxias from Roland. It's a super instrument. The idea, I think, is that it's essentially a host for every single software synthesizer they've ever done. You can plug the lot in. So it becomes like Analog Lab with Arturia, or, you know, one of those front ends for all of your stuff, like IK Multimedia do, or Falcon does, and that kind of thing. And so it allows you to create interwoven patches by taking sounds from different synthesizers from the Roland Cloud range, and then create an uber patch which you can mix and modulate and do extraordinarily interesting things to. So it's like a mega synth, the most enormous synth you could possibly imagine. It sucks in your entire Roland Cloud account, lays it all out for you, and encourages you to go crazy. Although I say infinite, it's not really infinite. I mean, the possibilities are infinite, no doubt, but you can only actually stack 4 instruments in an instance of Galaxias. So is it a Galaxy class, or is it merely universally large? Oh, I don't know, who cares? 4 synths, right? Put those together into a big fat scene and create this extraordinary synthesizer sound. A synthesizer hub, a place of extraordinary combiningness. I am hoping to get my hands on one of these for review at some point. This is the Hologram Chroma console. I mean, I've got the Microcosm, and I think it's one of the most fascinating and baffling effects boxes I've ever come across. I mean, fascinating and awesome, because you can get such beauty, such extraordinary ambient and interesting sound stuff can pour out of it. And then the interface, you just keep pressing on things, moving things, thinking, why and how does any of that work? I found it completely difficult to use. Is a lot of people would feature them in videos in the background. Very few people would actually do a video on it, because I suspect no one could quite work out how to use it. Dare I say? I mean, maybe that's wrong to say. But it was interesting because a video did come out by someone, I don't quite remember who, that was like, no, actually this is how you use it. And it was the one person who'd worked out how you actually get into it and use it properly and was able to lay that out for the rest of us, which of course we've all ignored, and we're still bashing around this pedal going, I don't really know how to use it. Oh, look, moments of beauty. And then more, I don't really know how to use it. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is that Hologram seem to have learnt from this experience, this experiment maybe, and have now released the Chroma console, which is just beautiful. Beautiful in not only what it looks like, which is simple but gorgeous, beautiful in what it sounds like, which is just amazing, but also beautiful in its workflow and its interface. It uses 4 colours, you've got 4 different sections, each one has a slightly different effect going on inside it, or different group of effects rather, different family of effects. What have you got? You've got character, you've got movement, you've got diffusion, and you've got texture. And just, you can combine those in any way that you like to create this gorgeous, I mean, it's like pouring vintageness over things. It's just delicious. What a delicious, fantastic feast of an effects box. So yeah, I'm looking forward to trying it out, looking forward to hearing more about it and seeing it in use. It has been already farmed out to a few people I've noted, but perhaps it's less everywhere than the microcosm was. But it looks like a lot of fun. Yeah, it really could be a fantastically interesting pedal / effects box for your desktop synths. Chaos Devices have introduced the Batumi II. The Batumi, the return. The revenge of the Batumi, if you like. I mean, some of this I think is in reflection of the fact that Behringer decided to clone their awesome LFO modulating device, because the Batumi is 4 LFOs which are linked together in interesting and different ways, either independently or through all sorts of phase shifting, sync, division, interesting ways. And it's great. It is awesome. But as I say, Behringer cloned it, which is a bit of a shame because it's a current, absolutely available now product. So Chaos Devices decided to go, well, let's just make it better. Let's rework it a bit and see if we can outdo what it is that Behringer are trying to clone. And so they have. It's still the same sort of basic vibe, basic look. You've got your 4 LFOs, but they've built in all the expansion they did. So now that's directly available on the front. So you've got a little bit more over the individual waveform control. You've still got 3 phase and divided modes, but you've now also got a multiple. So you can go faster as well as slower. You can easily assign different waveforms to the assignable output, different choices, as well as 2 different forms of randomization. But perhaps the biggest change is the fact the whole thing can now be tracked 1 volt per octave, making it a bit of an oscillator, a bit of a 4 oscillator, which is awesome. So the Batumi II, along with its Poti 2 expander, gives you access to everything you could possibly dream of in the realms of 4 LFOs, which are going to infect your system with awesomeness. ROLI, we love ROLI. We love ROLI because they've generated and created and produced one of the most awesome MP3 controllers on the planet. They are absolutely up there as an extraordinary device that allows you to interact interestingly with MPE enabled stuff. In fact, they're the very reason I think that MPE kind of exists in the way that it does, and the fact that it's been so prevalent. And so while ROLI are awesome, they're also a bit annoying, because they sort of went bankrupt. They sort of burnt through all their money and made some bad decisions. And they kind of disappeared, and then they came back. And every time they come back with a new product, which is really an old product, just slightly reworked, they kind of put it forward with their crazy marketing team as if it's just the most extraordinary thing that anyone has ever thought of, ever. And, you know, hackneyed old music journalists like myself just kind of go, oh, it's just so a bit boring, ROLI. You know, can't you just introduce something and go, hey, look, we brought this back because, you know, we had some trouble in that and it's just slightly better. Is that all right? But no, they don't do that. They say, wow, we've invented this. It's amazing. It's going to revolutionise your life. Guess what it has, right? Guess what it has? It's got MIDI. And you go, right, what? What's got MIDI? Our C-board block, right? You know that squishy little keyboard that we did that people could actually afford? Well, it never actually had MIDI on it before, didn't it? No, it just had a USB connection. Oh, right, yeah, no, of course, you just plug it into your computer. And so in order to use MPE enabled hardware, I had to always go into my computer and back out again. No, I remember now. So what ROLI have done is they've produced the same keyboard, the keyboard block. They've just put a little TRS socket on the back, so you can now go direct MIDI into your hardware. Brilliant. I mean, it's awesome. At the same time, I think they've taken the opportunity just to make it slightly more robust, so it doesn't just break in half all the time. And I'm sure they've upgraded bits and pieces along the way. But this is the ROLI Seaboard M. M for MIDI, see? It now has MIDI. I mean, I think that's great. You can also stack it up with the existing one and add another one to it to give you a longer, wider keyboard, which is nice because it has that magic function of not having a top C. Have you seen that? Have I ever mentioned that? I seem to mention that every time. So you have 24 notes. So it goes from C at the bottom to B. You think that would be okay, except when you want to play that C chord, you don't have that top C. So annoying. But you can, of course, have that if you add another one to it, which gives you double the range. And now I've got that C there. Oh, that's great. So I can now go, oh, now the C is missing at the top. So all it does is punts that missing C further up your keyboard. You have to keep buying extra ones just so that you can get that with your pinky. But, oh heck, it doesn't matter. It's a great keyboard. It's a great, fabulously useful MPE controller that's small, it's compact, it's relatively affordable, and now it has MIDI. The Tuesday from This Is Not Rocket Science is a procedural sequencer. The idea is that it has some kind of procedure that it follows in order to generate a sequence. So NextTuesday is the revitalised, upgraded, expanded version of that. And this has got a few more procedures in it in order to generate sequences. What does it do? Well, I don't know. You've got a bunch of buttons on the front which you set in order to blend together, I think, up to 4 different algorithms which then generate notes based on that. So the idea is really you turn it on, make it go, and it generates melodies. So you don't have to worry about dialing something in, working something out, playing something in, crafting some kind of tune. No, you just go, oi, next Tuesday, off you go. And it does, and it inevitably brings out something interesting, something nice. It's kind of, I guess you could see it as a bit like a Turing machine, but something which is a bit more intentional. A Turing machine just generates, is looking for randomization. It's just grabbing stuff and moving about, and that can become interesting in the way that you use it. With NextTuesday, the algorithms are designed to be musical. It's there written into its soul that it is to generate interesting musical things. You have some controls on the front in which you can sort of explore the landscape within the algorithm in order to tweak and push it into different places. You can change the root note. You can change the scale that it's following. You can also change how the beats of it work, its sort of internal rhythmic structure, and you can modulate the big heck out of it. I guess you could probably call it the equivalent to grids, but for melody, whereas Middle Instruments grids generates rhythms based on algorithms which you then explore with a couple of knobs. This does a similar thing but with melody. I've not tried one myself. I quite fancy the idea of giving it a go. DivKid Ochd that he made, going up here, with Instruo, is a brilliant little source of modulation. It's 8 LFOs, isn't it? Yeah, 8 LFOs, all that are sort of related, but there's no sort of sync to it. They are free-flowing, where at the top you have fast ones, at the bottom you have slow ones. You've got a single tempo knob which changes that. Their relationships kind of stay the same, although they probably expand and pulse and bring themselves back together again. So the top ones, they speed up, everything speeds up, but they have this graduatedness to it. Now, DivKid and Instruo have just released an expander to it, which takes its 8 outputs and turns them into 24 outputs. It massively expands upon modulation possibilities that this thing is kicking out, while at the same time using the very nature of those original LFOs in order to generate these new ones. What do I mean? So what you get is 4 banks of different takes on those original LFOs. So the first bank is very, very simple. It just folds the LFO up. So where you have a bipolar sine wave going up and down like that, or it's a triangle wave, I don't know whatever wave it is, a triangle wave, rather than big one up and down, it's now half the height but up, so it's all positive. The next group of 4 uses them together to create different shapes. So it's using a couple of different timed LFOs to create a differently shaped LFO 4 times. The next one is pulling triggers from it. Now these are not going to be triggers which are going to stay in time to anything in particular because of the nature of the Ocd, but it's creating these triggers that you could use creatively within your patch. And the final lot at the bottom are sort of randomized sample and hold type versions of different LFOs. So all of them are following the same weird relational timing between itself, and it's like this throbbing source and center of movement which you can just pull out now 24 sources and jam them all over the place, and with one knob send it from sort of sublime delicateness into a frenzy of craziness. It's brilliant. It is quite brilliant. I plan to do a video on it as soon as I can get up the nerve to say this is how this works. And finally, you know, I did that thing with the battery, right? Battery powered this, went outside, went to the seaside, got myself drowned, played my modular on a battery. Yeah, that was fascinating. Everybody liked that video. Everyone got a lot out of it, I think. Anyway, there's more to do on that, I have to say, and I ended up talking to MyVolts. Now, MyVolts are well into their power stuff, and they said, well, the funny thing is, right, we're also working on exactly the sort of thing that you were after. Had I waited another couple of months, you know, I'd already waited 2 years, I could have waited a couple more months, they probably would have had a solution directly for me. And so what I hope to do is, with a bit of luck, MyVolts are going to send me this power bank that they're working on in order for me to try that kind of thing out. They're already kind of almost there, they haven't quite got it ready yet, you know, a little bit more tweaking required, but they sent me a couple of the cables which are part of it, and these are, I mean, the whole thing is a little bit complicated, but MyVolts definitely do a bloody good job at trying to get this stuff understood. So what I've got here, I've got, this has just turned up, I haven't had a proper look yet, but the idea is that they have these cables which will go into this power bank, which then has a power delivery function within it to enable it to go beyond what USB can normally do, which is 5 volts, into greater bits of voltageness. And so that's done through clever technology that are in these things here, I think. There's a 12 volt one, this is a 9 volt one. What am I talking? I don't know. So I think what happens is I plug this into the power brick, or the thing they were looking at, and the interesting thing is that it gives you a little readout on the cable here. But they've sent me a couple of these bits and pieces that I'm going to plug into different things to see if I can get them powered, with the idea being that their power brick, when that turns up, should be able to run my whole rig. And I'm sorry I can't tell you anything more clever about it, but they've kind of only just started talking about it. You'll find it on Instagram that they've started talking about what they're doing, and at the moment they're inviting people to get in touch with them to talk about their power needs, so that they know exactly what it is that they need to put together for people. So that'll do, I think. I think that's plenty. Plenty. Now, there won't be a live stream this weekend because, well, as it happens, it's my birthday and I've got better things to do, frankly. But I'll try to fit a live stream in now before Christmas, somewhere between now and Christmas if I can, because I think that'll be fun. I always enjoy a bit of a chinwag, a bit of a beer, a bit of a play. Got lots of stuff to play on. So no live stream this time. Very sorry, very sad. I am still working on my 10-year anniversary video thing. I don't know whether that's really, who cares? We're just getting on with stuff. So much stuff to get on with. Coming up soon, I'm going to have the Mojave, the Qubit thing. I've got some wonderful little drum modules from XAOCs. Why do people have complicated names? I have no idea. I've got these wonderful effects from Erica Synths I'm working on the Bullfrog synthesizer over there, which I'll do a video on soon. I've still got the IK synthesizer to do stuff on, and I have tons of DIY, tons of modules yawning back for years that I need to be working on. So there's always going to be interesting videos coming along. So stick with it, stay with us, and if you're particularly interested and particularly enthusiastic about what I do, then come over to Patreon. Give us a couple of dollars and help fund this exciting adventure into music technology. That would be awesome, and you get to I don't know, hang out with me. I mean, that's nice, isn't it? You would have thought. So do consider that. Otherwise, subscribe, all those sorts of things. We're very, very, very nearly at 50,000 subscribers. It would be great if we could get there. So give us a bit of a splurge. If you've never subscribed to anything before ever, just hit the subscribe button. Do it. Do it and see if by the end of the year we can get to 50,000. That would be something, I think. That would be something. So I hope that's helpful. And in the meantime, go and make some tunes.